we are going to see the gas transport in blood now pictorially, which would be a relief for you from my diagrams, which are quite wavy and little bit difficult to apprehend. Now this over here would have some pictorial representation. You would find a better understanding where I try to represent blood and where I try to represent alveoli in totally distorted diagrams. Over here we are going to have a beautiful presentation of that. So first of all, we have gas transport in blood. Now you know that there are two gases which are involved in the respiration and breathing mechanisms that we are discussing. The two gases are carbon dioxide and oxygen, and we are going to study about that only. When we studied about their exchange, we saw that the exchange was taking place at tissues and alveoli, and the structure of that exchange area, basically the membrane across which that exchange was taking place, it enabled the exchange easily. The primary primary driving force behind that exchange was the difference in partial pressures. That is one part. What we are going to concentrate over here is that how that gas transport takes place once the gas has been exchanged within the cells into the blood. Now the blood being the connective tissue, it carries both the gases, whether carbon dioxide or oxygen. Now it has affinity for carbon dioxide, which is more as compared to oxygen. Blood has certain components which enable the transport of these gases. We studied that how hemoglobin plays an important role in the transport of oxygen, how there is an enzyme known as carbonic anhydrase which has an important role in transporting carbon dioxide, bicarbonate ions and rest of the things, if you can recall. Over here we are going to do that only, but in a better pictorial representations. First of all, let us consider about oxygen. Oxygen forms oxyhemoglobin with hemoglobin molecules, and on the other hand carbon dioxide, it forms the bicarbonates in plasma. First and foremost thing that is of the difference, that there would be oxyhemoglobin with the hemoglobin molecules which are present in RBCs. Okay, RBC is a component of blood and plasma is also a component of blood. So you are going to find CO2 in the form of bicarbonates in plasma, while you are going to find oxygen in the form of oxyhemoglobin in RBCs. Now this is somewhat resembling how I used to represent heart, and this is the heart. Okay, you are being shown the deoxygenated blood. When I say deoxygenated blood, that means blood rich in carbon dioxide. It is devoid of oxygen. The 5 milliliter of oxygen that we were talking about has been taken up by the tissues. So the blue represents the deoxygenated blood, the red represents the oxygenated blood. Now there won't be separate alveoli as shown over here, separate alveoli for carbon dioxide and separate alveoli for oxygen. It would be the similar alveoli. Just for the representation purpose, they have taken these alveoli. These ones are for the carbon dioxide. When the carbon dioxide is inhaled, okay, carbon dioxide is never inhaled first of all. When the carbon dioxide is exhaled, we are representing these alveoli, and over here oxygen is for these alveoli. Now let's talk about, you have inhaled the air and that would be taken up, the oxygen would be taken up from there. So you are making the blood which has come from heart, okay, to the lungs, you are making it oxygenated. The oxygenated blood, the blood which was deoxygenated. Now let's start from here. Keep this lower part aside, keep these pulmonary circulation up, we are going to consider it. Now see, the heart has pumped deoxygenated blood that came to it towards the lungs. The heart reaches over there, it throws out carbon dioxide and it is devoid of carbon dioxide now. It takes up oxygen and goes to heart again. From that heart area, it is pumped towards the tissues. When it goes towards the tissues, what happens? It takes the oxygen and drops the oxygen over at the site of tissues. From the tissues, it takes up carbon dioxide, and in this way, the circulation takes place. Now, what you have to remember over here, out of all this what I have said, you have to remember that this part, that is the deoxygenated part, would have maximum bicarbonates in their plasma, and the oxygenated part would have RBCs rich in oxyhemoglobin. So this is what is the crux of this entire gas transport that we have seen. Next thing is how this exchange is taking place. Because we have seen the gas transport, how it takes place. Next we are going to see that how exchange takes place. First representation is of external respiration in lungs, where the pulmonary gas exchange takes place. Now what is pulmonary gas exchange? That is, you have alveoli, you have air which is rich in oxygen, the air which is rich in oxygen has to give its oxygen to the blood. Okay, the blood which is having RBCs, which is having plasma, which has lot of bicarbonates inside it, because it has come with the carbonates from the bicarbonates rather, it is deoxygenated blood that has reached the pulmonary exchange site. It would take up oxygen and instead it would give carbon dioxide back to the alveoli. And the second representation is of internal respiration in the body tissues, where the systemic capillaries would be responsible for gas exchange. Now, what did systemic capillaries bring with them? See this diagram. These are the systemic veins. These systemic veins, they bring about oxygenated blood. So this over here is the systemic capillary gas exchange, where you get oxygenated blood and it is to be exchanged at the tissue site. The oxygenated blood would be given, the oxygen would be given to the tissues and the blood would become devoid of oxygen. At that place carbon dioxide would come and it would become deoxygenated. So this is what we have to see. Now let us see what the diagram is trying to represent. Oxygen is loaded into the blood and carbon dioxide is unloaded. That is what we talked about. These are the alveolar sacs. The alveoli is having, this happens to be the basement membrane. This is the capillary epithelium. So what happens is, because the air is having lots of oxygen, the partial pressure difference, according to the partial pressure difference, this oxygen diffuses and binds with hemoglobin of the RBCs, and it forms HbO2, that is oxyhemoglobin. In the meantime, this has taken place because the bicarbonates, they got released in the form of carbon dioxide. Now what happens? The deoxygenated blood has higher partial pressure of carbon dioxide as compared to the partial pressure of carbon dioxide inside the alveoli. Now as a result of that, there is conversion of bicarbonate ions into carbonic acid in the presence of carbonic anhydrase. This carbonic acid then again gets converted to carbon dioxide in gaseous form and water is being released and the carbon dioxide goes into the alveolar sacs. All this is taking place in plasma and this binding of oxygen is taking place in RBCs. This is quite clear from this diagram. Over here, what would happen at the site of tissues? Now tissues are having high partial pressure of carbon dioxide because cellular respiration has taken place, which results in the formation of carbon dioxide. Now because of high partial pressure, this carbon dioxide has to diffuse out and it would go into the plasma. You know, plasma is rich in water, it would combine with water and form carbonic acid. Now again this reaction is being assisted by carbonic anhydrase. This reaction, as you can see over here, this is nothing but reverse of this. So the enzyme carbonic anhydrase, it is assisting in both the ways of reaction. Carbon dioxide and water combine, water of plasma, they combine and form carbonic acid. Carbonic acid then further breaks into bicarbonate ions and hydrogen ion. This is how the bicarbonate ion formation that we studied, that we talked about, that it moves in the form of bicarbonate. Now the blood becomes deoxygenated and this is how what we have discussed takes place. So this is the systemic capillary. In the other way, the partial pressure of oxygen in the tissue is quite low because over here carbon dioxide is higher. So the partial pressure difference is such that the oxyhemoglobin that was being formed, it dissociates, oxygen which becomes gaseous is being taken up by the tissues. So this is what takes place at the exchange sites. Now we have to talk about chloride shift. We did discuss about various reactions that are taking place and they are represented at the reaction level. In the previous slide also you have seen that those are reactions only, but over here what we see is what happens inside RBCs. This red part is RBC, this is entire blood, the yellowish part is the plasma. Over here also it is the same. Now this is the capillary this epithelium, these are the tissues, this would be alveoli membrane and this would be capillary epithelium. Now you have to see the capillary epithelium inside would have blood that has the cellular component and the matrix that is plasma. Now see, in the case of tissue, let's take the example of oxygen. We are considering over here oxygen, and oxygen release and take up would be responsible for a phenomena known as chloride shift. Chloride shift would be involving chloride ions, which are important for maintaining an ionic balance. Now, what ionic balance we are talking about? Because we say that carbon dioxide transport is taking place in the form of bicarbonate, and we know that RBCs contain carbonic anhydrase that is present inside the RBCs only. So, that bicarbonate which is being formed, that would be converted into carbon dioxide, or it would be converted into carbonate inside the RBCs only, and then it would be transported outwards from plasma. This is one thing you have to remember, that we say that bicarbonate goes in the plasma. They do go in the plasma, but the reaction, that is conversion of carbon dioxide into bicarbonate, or the conversion of bicarbonate into the carbon dioxide, that has to take place inside CO2. Don't get misguided by this particular reaction which is shown in plasma. It is carried in plasma, but the reaction has to take place inside the RBCs only. Now see this, what would happen? Over here you see, in the case of oxygen release and carbon dioxide pickup which takes place in the tissues, at the site of tissues, you see that carbon dioxide is too high inside the tissues and oxygen is quite less. Oxygen has to go inside and the carbon dioxide has to come inside the RBCs. Now see, CO2, it is in very so negligible amount it is transported as in dissolved state in plasma. It comes and gets dissolved in the plasma. In a very slow reaction, the CO2 combines with water inside the plasma of blood, and gets converted to the bicarbonate that we require, and that we say that maximum transport, almost 70% transport, is in the form of bicarbonate ions. Then this another form is, see these arrows, they represent the quantity, that is of CO2. This much quantity, this thick arrow shows that a lot of quantity of carbon dioxide would come inside the RBCs very quickly, very quickly. If I am saying very quickly, and that is enzymatic, that means almost 1 million times faster, this carbon dioxide combines with water, it gets converted to bicarbonate, and as I told you that bicarbonate has to be transported by plasma, this bicarbonate has to come out. Okay, when this bicarbonate comes out, in order to balance that negative charge loss, chloride ions come inside. When these chloride ions come inside, there is the protons which are left, they combine with hemoglobin and form protonated hemoglobin. This protonated hemoglobin is formed because we had oxyhemoglobin that broke down and oxygen was released. I am repeating it all over again, that you see the blood had oxygen in the form of oxyhemoglobin. As much as 97% of oxygen was present in the form of oxyhemoglobin. At the same time, because it is the site of tissues, the carbon dioxide would be taken up. These carbon dioxide gaseous forms would be converted into bicarbonate ions, and they would be transported in the plasma. Now what happens is, we need bicarbonate formation, and the bicarbonate has to go into plasma. This bicarbonate, it goes into plasma, and instead chloride ions come inside in order to balance the charge. These protons, they combine with the hemoglobin which has been released as a result of partial pressure difference, which enables the breakdown of oxyhemoglobin, and oxygen is given to the tissues. This is what takes place at the site where carbon dioxide is being picked and oxygen is being released. On the contrary, at the site of alveoli, oxygen has to be picked and carbon dioxide is to be given out to the alveoli. Now you know that bicarbonates which were outside, they would move inside because the reaction has to be very rapid. For making the reaction very rapid, you need the enzyme. That enzyme is present inside the RBCs. Now what will happen? There would be a reverse chloride shift. First of all, the chloride ions would come out and the carbonates would go inside. These bicarbonates would combine with hydrogen ions. Now how those hydrogen ions are being released? Because now the oxygen combines with hemoglobin and the proton is being released from the protonated hemoglobin. This protein combines with bicarbonate, they form carbonic acid, then the enzyme comes, it hastens up the reaction as much as 10,000 times, or you can say million times, it is released in the form of carbon dioxide. The remaining oxygen, the oxygen that was according to the partial pressure, the remaining one is that maximum amount comes like oxyhemoglobin. The remaining oxygen that is present, that comes and dissolves in plasma, and that is how it is transported. A small amount which was dissolved in plasma of carbon dioxide, that would also diffuse according to the partial pressure difference, and the very slow reaction of bicarbonate conversion that is taking place inside the plasma itself without the agency of enzymes, that would also release carbon dioxide into the alveoli. So this is about the exchange of gases which is taking place at different sites. Now exchange is such that when we study it from the exchange point of view, we are studying its transport as well, that how each gas is transported and what is the content and what is the transport ability, what was that ability of the gas basically, and what the compound whichever it formed, it enables the exchange which is easier in accordance with the partial pressure.